little bit over 30 years, multifamily since 2002. Since that time, I've bought about $500 million in real estate, which is comprised of 2,500 apartment units, 700 and I don't know, something houses, single family houses, duplexes and fourplexes and other stuff like that. So managed to somehow survive several market cycles, raise $100 million from individual investors to fuel this business, and I'm still alive. So that means I must be doing at least one thing right.
Well, hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm Omar. I am not a dig at Brian, but I'm definitely not as old as Brian because I've not been doing this since '89. I was born in '85. My background's in corporate finance, M&A. I did that, and I moved down to the U.S. 3 years ago. We're in 1,100 units, and I leveraged a lot of my background structuring deals on the investment banking and private equity side to basically kind of come in. Just because of my background, I also had a lot of connections, which kind of eased on the initial raising capital side of the business. And here I am because of Dan, talking to you guys.
Cool. All right, so I'm in between these two in age. I was born in '75, not '85 or whatever other, and I've been
Whatever.
Right. Yeah. I've been in business for 15 years, since 2005. We got in business doing smaller properties, landlording a lot of it ourselves, single family homes and duplexes and stuff like that, which is like Brian, we still own a lot of that stuff. We own an office building, some commercial retail spots and stuff. We got into multifamily about 5 years ago and really have really enjoyed the multifamily space. So we've expanded quickly into that world. And we're active in North Carolina and Kentucky right now in our marketplaces.
And Matt, you should also tell us what your son told me what you do. What does Daddy do?
Oh, yeah. My son told me that Daddy works on properties and does paperwork. Yeah. He first said that we shot a documentary for Bigger Pockets, which hasn't been released yet, but they were interviewing him and they asked him what Daddy did for a living, and that's what he said. So,
I thought that was pretty cute because just in all disclosure, I met Matt at a
right.
I thought that was pretty funny when his son said it.
He's right. That's what Daddy does. Yeah. But yeah, and it's an honor to be here and share my story with everybody. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, let's dive right in and just go straight into the first question that we have here. And I'm going to leave it open for you guys to kind of jump in as you feel necessary. So I don't want you to feel like I'm going to pressure anybody to answer a question, but if each one of you want to jump in and kind of give a little bit of input on these various questions that I have, that'd be great. And for those of you who are watching, if you have questions following up to some of the things I'm going to be teeing them up for, feel free to add them into that Q&A box and want to have some dialogue back and forth with you as well as our panelists here. And so first, I want to kick it off and have you guys answer the question, which is, what are some strategies that you use when negotiating a contract with a multifamily seller?
Boy, is there such a thing as negotiation anymore? It seems like, we have 20 offers, send us your best one, and we're not even going to counter you. We'll either take you if you're good or we're going to the next guy.
Yeah.
That seems to be really what the order of the day is. But I would say that, one of the important things that I think everybody needs to keep in mind when they're negotiating a purchase contract is not to get emotionally involved and wrapped up in the moment where your only goal is to beat anybody else that's bidding on it. You've got to draw a line in the sand of how much you're willing to pay and what pricing level is going to allow you to produce a result for your investors or for yourself if you're using your own capital, and stick to that line in the sand and don't get wrapped up in, come up another 100 grand and the deal is yours. If the deal pencils at your number and it doesn't pencil higher, if it takes another 100 grand to get it, let that be someone else's problem and not yours. You've got to stay disciplined, or you'll find yourself with a really short career. That'd be my advice.
I would like to add on to that. I think that's 100% correct. But this is a point I've never kind of understood when I hear this question a lot. Is, well, look, the price either works or it doesn't. You put it through your model, and if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. You just kind of move on, right? Because at the end of the day, nobody's buying the Empire State Building or, the Statue of Liberty here. We're just buying an apartment complex, So if it works, great. If it doesn't, there's a lot of fish in the sea. I think where that fear comes from, though, Brian, I mean, you're very experienced, so I guess you can take it easy. But where that experience comes from is I think a lot of folks that are starting out, they have a fear of missing out. Like, if I lose this, then I'm never going to get another deal again. And guys, this country's not running out of apartment buildings.
No.
There's going to be more. Don't worry.
So for us, we've negotiated a few off the market deals, and when it's not an off the market deal, when it's a highest and best thing, Brian's absolutely right that there's really not much negotiation. You just got to put your best foot forward, and we tend to understand that there's going to be a best and final round. We know it's going to be a best and final round. We understand that, so we tend to leave a little bit of money on the table in our pocket. Because it's expected for you to come up a bit. So that's a little dance we like to do. So we might go in at like 97% of our MAO, max allowable offer, on offering on a complex that there is a best and final round. It's just because our goal there is to make it to the best and final round. It's not to get the complex, it's to make it to the next round. And so once we've done that, then we'll go up a little bit on price. And that's when I'm typically the one that gets on the conference call with the seller, and I put my selling shoes on and convince them that that I'm their best shot for closing and everything like that. And we also put our best foot forward then. So we tend to, that's a tactic we use, is to leave a little bit of money in our pocket that we can bring forward if we need it. That's number one. We've gotten into a lot of negotiations. We just closed an off the market deal, and so we were able to, believe it or not, negotiate on a property. And also after due diligence, we find sometimes these things come up. What I find works there is a tactic that we've used is give and take. So, well, okay, I need another 50 grand. Okay, great. If you need 50 grand, then I need something else. I need, lower earnest money deposit, or I need a little more time, or I need something that benefits me. And that. So I tend to try and give and take on properties. We just closed a property, and we, in exchange for us assuming some township violations on the property, so we're like, listen, I'll take those off your plate. I'll deal with that, but you're also going to give me some money. And so now it's up to me to try and get the work done for the money he gave us or less. So I try and do a give and take model for negotiations. I rarely will just give away something without trying to take something back as a push-pull.
So one of the questions that just came through here that I was actually going to ask you as a follow-up to this, I'm glad David asked this question, is about, hard money up front. So for those of you who might be watching aren't familiar with what that is, we're not talking about taking a hard money loan out or anything like that. This is the earnest money deposit on one of these assets that you put up that goes hard, which means that it's non-refundable the day you sign the contract or the PSA before the due diligence is even done. So, in your experience as the panelists here, have you ever, or do you feel like it's necessary to be able to put up this hard money to be able to compete? And if so, what do you feel about, the sellers wanting, substantial numbers or substantial amounts of that hard money in order to be able to be awarded the deal?
Well, the short answer is yes. If you want to compete in today's market, that's the short answer. The long answer is, well, it depends. How much money do you have, and how much money can you put up hard? Right? I mean, look, presumably, like Dan knows this, right? We were on a deal in Jacksonville. It was about $25 million. We put up $300,000 hard money. It was a very good deal. Usually we don't do that. And we're like, okay, we can try to muscle somebody out because we had liquidity at that time. And Dan knows this because we just talked about it a few weeks ago. Somebody came in with $1 million hard money day one, no contingency. Now, my point is, yeah, if I was a seller, I too would have taken that person's option. So my point is, look, if you want to play in 17, 20, 25, 30, whatever, 50, wherever you are on the spectrum, right? Yeah, I mean, look, that's what the market demands. But again, at the end of the day, how much should you pay? That's a factor of, well, how good is your negotiating power, right? I mean, if you're the only buyer, you can get away with murder, right? But if you're not the only buyer, and there's presumably people like Matt and Brian you're competing, or myself competing with, well, then you either put up or you shut up sort of deal, especially in the big markets. That's just the way it is.
I think it has a lot to do with the market that you're in, and Omar's right about that. Is, if you're buying in, Ottumwa, Iowa, I just made that up, maybe that's a city, you might not have to put up hard money because you might be the only person trying to buy there. But if you're trying to buy something in Phoenix, Arizona, Atlanta, Georgia, Orlando, Florida, any of the markets that are performing enormously well, there's a lot of buyers in search of product there. And, there's a competitive climate that's created this hard money stigma. I hate it. My personal policy is I refuse to put up hard money, and I tell the brokers that, and we still get deals, but you'll get asked that a lot. What the seller is really asking for is they're asking for certainty of closing. They want to know that you're not going to put the property in contract, find some lame reason to back out and leave them hanging. And so if you can provide that certainty with stuff like, look, here's all the deals we've closed in the last 12 months, 24 months. Here's where we're getting our equity. All those kinds of questions. Sometimes you can get around the hard money issue. If you don't have big advantages there from showing them those kinds of things, sometimes hard money might be the only way you can bridge that gap. A lot of times we've just moved on. It's like, we want 300K hard money. Too bad you're not getting it from me. Go sell it to somebody else. That's probably why my hit rate on marketed deals is about 0%. That'll do that. So, sometimes you have to do it to get the deal, but I try not to.
So we've been asked for it almost every time. If it's a best and final deal that's a mass marketed deal, every letter I've gotten welcoming us to the best and final round has always suggested from the broker that we offer that. So brokers love it because they feel like it's it makes the deal more likely to close. So I see most brokers push for it, and I think that they kind of puppeteer their seller to make them think that they should be wanting it too. So I think the brokers are actually driving a lot of the desire for that on the market. I tend to stay out of the super hot markets in the U.S. Where there's lots and lots of bidding, and like Brian, I try and buy stuff off the market, or try and don't buy mass marketed projects. The ones that I have bought have been, I don't like them, but you gotta play ball to get into markets sometimes. We have yet to have to post money hard. We've been asked for it 100 times, but like Brian, we typically say no. But I also think that I'm in markets that aren't as hot to where it's just expected. Perhaps where Omar you are, it's just expected to be in that sandbox you're in. That must be what's required.
And by the way, that's a sandbox of my own choosing. So like Matt said, you don't have to be in that market. Nobody's putting a gun to your head.
Yeah, not every market. I think made a bottom line for you, Dan, is not every market's going to require that if it's not as competitive.
But to Brian's point, though, also, I think it also depends on your positioning as a buyer. Mm-hmm. So if you're like Brian and you're just hitting these things out of the park, well, you have a leg to stand on versus some newbie who's coming in, never closed a deal, never bought anything. In fact, isn't even sure how they're going to source their equity or debt.
I think that Brian really also, let's all agree with Brian here, is that
I agree with him.
Right. Yeah, let's tell Brian.
I didn't even hear him. I'll agree with him.
Awesome. I think that really, let's see what's behind the seller, really the broker asking for earnest money hard day one. And that's certainty of closing. I think you're absolutely right. And so if I can provide that through my resume and through my track record in certainty of closing, and that I'm not going to mess around with you, I'm going to close this deal. If I can give them that, then it's just as good as money going hard in some ways.
Yeah, you can say, here's a list of 7 brokers we've closed with. Call those guys and ask them how we act during an escrow. And assuming that you act good during an escrow, you're probably going to get a good review. Now, of course, if you're not going to get a good review, then start stacking up your hard money.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things that I was going to mention too is that it depends on the market, but it also depends on the deal. Because even our group has looked at certain deals in markets that usually require, not really require, but you know what I mean, that they usually demand for that hard money, day one. But you look at the deal itself and you're just like, I'm just not so sure what might come up during due diligence that might kill the deal. So I'm not going to be as confident putting up that hard money as one where I know for sure that the property is great. I know there's nothing crazy, but we're bidding on a property right now where we're not going to put up any hard money, but if the market usually demands it. But right now, it's actually a really nice asset that was built in about mid 2000s. But the original developer still has handwritten ledgers, so they're doing no software or anything. And so there's just a lot of like weird stuff going on that I'm just like, I'm not going to put hard money on that one because I'm not sure how that's going to go when we get into that due diligence period.
Sure.
You know, guys, hi guys. Sorry, I'm late to the party here. Let's start from the beginning again, okay? Like, pick up.
Start over.
Just kidding. Just kidding. You know, but I think I can jump in on the topic because I just had a podcast with a great broker out of Atlanta. His name was Michael Bull of Bull Realty, and I asked him about this exact question about, you know, those types of offers that come to the table with hard money on day one, and he said, you know, we don't really look at that as being all that great. I mean, there are other factors that we take into consideration, but you know what would be much more effective from a buyer instead of hard money on day one? I said, what's that? He goes, two things. First off, I've had a conversation with a guy beforehand, and he has told me that if I work with him, he will protect me. And I thought, wow, that's a strange thing to say, but that was the number one thing that he came up with. And then the number two was, instead of just sending over a letter of intent, they send over a FedEx package with 3 purchase and sale contracts, all executed with a cover letter detailing everything that's in the purchase and sale contracts. We get something like that, and that person moves to the top of the pile. It's like, wow, that's unique. I hadn't heard that one before.
So let's pivot a little bit. Those are actually two great tips there. I hadn't actually heard of that, but that's actually great. Obviously, they still might want to negotiate that contract or that PSA, but it definitely, you know, sets you
Especially
apart.
my contract.
Yes. So what percentage of deals would you guys say that you're bidding on that they kind of like that hard money?
100% is what they like.
I say less than 20%.
I think it just depends on the market and the types of assets that you're going after, because, you know, some of the smaller multifamily deals, you know, they might not, or even the mid-sized ones might not require them or, you know, demand them. But even in some of the hotter markets, even if it is a smaller one, they might. And like you said, that just depends on the deal. It says the deal as well as the market that it's in as well. So there's a lot of different dynamics that kind of play into that particular aspect of it. Another question here is let's see here. Are any of you shortening your due diligence period to like 14 to 21 days in order to stay competitive on those initial offers?
I'm not seeing it. What we're tending to do is remove the financing contingency and essentially extend the due diligence period a little bit. So essentially the due diligence period becomes the financing contingency. And that way the offer does not have a financing contingency. It just has a longer due diligence period.
I've done
ours either. We're doing 30-day due diligence, no finance contingency. You know, wrap it all up in 30. 14 on these size properties, and no way.
Yeah, we're in the same boat. We'll, you know, when we first got started, you would do a 30-day due diligence, and then you really wouldn't really get your banker involved until after that was done and you were certain you were going to buy the deal. And then you would do another 30 days beyond that, and then so you say close it in like 90. In our business, we've seen the closing cycle close to say all in, you know, 60 days, 75 days, somewhere in there. For us to do due diligence, I'm already working with our lender, and the appraisal and the phase one and all that will happen while we're still in the middle of the due diligence period. So I'd rather not collapse due diligence down any further than 30 days. I actually try and get 45 when I can, or I'll do 30 with an option to extend if I post more money.
Hey, have you guys had any issue with, you know, I had the same question with Kevin Jenkins. I don't know if you work with Kevin. He's a great lender out of North Carolina. But he has said that these 60-day closings, that Fannie and Freddie can't do it. So don't even bother putting them in.
Right.
We're doing 60-day closes on all of ours. We haven't had one go past 60 days yet. Wow. So
are you using Fannie and Freddie?
All the time.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, we have it in there to extend if we need it, but so far we haven't had to extend it. And they've always been, I think it also depends on the brokers you're using. I mean, I've never used Kevin, so I know Kevin, and I've met him in person, but I haven't ever used him or his group for it, but we haven't had the issue. What about anybody else? You guys had any issues with Fannie or Freddie going past 60?
That's interesting.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to the next question here, and let's see. All right. So Devin has a question of, are you guys sensing or seeing some disruption coming to multifamily ecosystem in terms of industry control, time and cost to buy, sell, and pain points, ease of buyers, sellers, and syndicators?
That's one question.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a loaded question.
Yeah. I'm going to let Brian go ahead of me on this one.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
We'll start calling people.
Well, you've got the green screen.
I haven't. I haven't seen any major industry disruptors. I think the biggest industry disruptor really is just the awareness of, the private offering real estate space has increased since the Jobs Act, and, crowdfunding and all these different things are starting to make more people aware that multifamily passive investments are an option for them. That's really the only industry game changer I've seen in the last, 20 or 30 years I've been doing this.
Yeah, I just think there's more people involved in the space, partly thanks to just market awareness that Wall Street's not the only place to build wealth anymore, but also, to be straight, thanks to a lot of, people selling seminars and stuff like that on how great it would be to be a multifamily syndicator. Going all the way, I mean, the education space on how to syndicate real estate's been going on for years, and I think some of us maybe participated in it, but it's become more popular. So there's become more people that want to be in the real estate multifamily space. So I think for that, and because of even Bigger Pockets and all the other podcasts and excitement about it, there's just become a lot more people that are in the world of multifamily bidding. So that maybe has driven up prices a little bit, driven up some attention. I think that most brokers and sellers can weed out who's serious and who just went to a weekend class a week ago and is now trying to bid on a 300-unit apartment building. So
it's Charles's fault.
It is.
No, that's not me. What are you talking about? That's Joe Fairless's fault. Don't blame me. Come on, you Dan Hanford.
It's no one particular individual's fault. I think it all goes back to people are wanting some other way they can build wealth and build something for themselves, and it's not Charles's fault or Joe Fairless's fault or Rod Cleave's fault or any of those guys' fault. It's people are going to it because they're looking for something different.
I disagree with Matt. It is Joe Fairless's fault. So yeah. I'm kidding. He's a great guy. He's fantastic. He's a great guy. I really like Joe. I'm just teasing.
Yeah.
Well, let's pivot away from this question because I want to keep the questions geared towards these top negotiating tactics on the topic here for the panel. So try to keep your questions geared towards that if you can, and let's move on from this question. So the next question here that I have on the list here is how have you seen broker relations playing a role in your ability to negotiate a better deal? And I don't necessarily want to say a better deal, but maybe even better terms, or having those brokers be able to kind of sell you to the sellers, if you will.
Oh, that's crucial. Is you got to understand that you are in sales and marketing when you're in this business. And your first sale is to get the seller to accept your offer. That's the first sale. And the broker is going to be your agent, essentially, in this process. So, and then even when it comes back to having to, go back to him at the end of the due diligence, things don't work out. You've got to get the broker to sell your changes to the owner. So that broker is crucial in getting that deal closed. So maintaining a strong relationship with that broker at all times is crucial.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, it's like any financial intermediary, right? I mean, the more people that are vetting you, the more people that are talking, say good things about you, right? The easier the entire thing is going to be. So it is very important to develop that relationship, because if you think about it, it's really you as a buyer, potentially a seller, and the guy in the middle. And if either one of these people is pissed off at each other, it's not going to work. So it's really helpful, I feel.
So I have a different perspective on this, because I think about it. When I deal with people, maybe it's because my wife's got a background in psychology or something like that, but I started to think about the psychological motivation for people. And the broker's motivation, they don't get paid unless the deal closes, right? And so the broker is supposed to be married to the seller from a higher, like that's who they work for directly, but really the broker's working for the deal, And the brokers, when they don't get, I get it. This isn't a hobby for them. They don't get paid unless that deal closes. And so indirectly, subconsciously, they are going to defend the deal above all else. And so if I need them to do something, I will speak to them in a reference of keeping the deal going, making sure we close, making, indirectly making sure they get paid, and making sure this thing goes to closing. And if I need to apply some pressure, once I'm under contract, I can speak into the fear of the deal maybe not closing, which means they're not going to get paid. And that, so I tend to understand the broker's motivation truly, which is the deal closing, above all else when I'm working with them and negotiating with the broker.
I'll say that just to add on to that, and Matt's entirely correct, but to add on just another layer of how broker relationships will make or break you as a buyer, let me flip the script for a moment and give you a peek behind the curtain of what the conversation sounds like when you're the seller. So when we're selling a property, we'll get a list of offers. And the first thing we do is we enter into a conversation with the broker about what they know about each of the buyers that submitted the offer. Yep. And they're going to say, oh, well, this guy, I've sold him 8 other deals and he retrades every time. And this guy, he's got, he doesn't have equity. He has to go try to find it. But this guy, he's got the money in the bank and I've sold him 12 properties in the last 2 years. And he just puts up and shuts up and gets the deal closed. And the broker is relating to us as a seller what he's learned in his relationship with each of these buyers, and he's relaying that to us, and we're making a crucial decision based upon that. So in the last deal that we sold, we had, I think, 13 offers. We kind of limited it to the top 4 or 5, and we had 2 groups essentially at the top. One was a couple $100,000 higher than the other, but it was what the broker told us about the 2 buyers, the 2 top buyers, that caused us to select the lower of those 2 top offers, and they end up closing the deal at the price, on time, and all the things like the broker said. If it wasn't for that broker's relationship, we would have picked the higher offer, right? So having good broker relationships means everything when you're a buyer. It also means that you get access to deals that you otherwise wouldn't. And as I mentioned earlier in this panel, I told everybody that my hit rate on marketed deals is about as close to 0% as you can get. But yet we're closing, we'll probably close 1,000 units this year. And it's because we have relationships with brokers that bring us stuff. They say, hey, I've got this guy, he's thinking about selling, this is his number. And they're going to get it if they put it on the market. Maybe they even get more if they put it on the market. And it's not about, oh, I'm going to get this 20% less than what they'd pay if it did go to market. It's all about, I can acquire this at this price that works with my underwriting. I don't have to compete against other guys. I don't have to put up hard money and do all this other stuff. And all of that happens because of a relationship with the broker. So it's everything.
One of the things I would ask you about that deal that you just sold, Brian, to kind of dovetail what we talked about earlier.
Hard money.
Did you require hard money when you were selling?
We did not require hard money. Of course, I asked for it like everybody does, and he said he gave the same answer I would have given, kind of like, no, I'm not going to do that, and we let that go.
Thought I'd just throw it out there to see what you do on the sell.
Yeah. No, I to go, Omar.
So going back to you, Brian, so on the sell side of the negotiating, because I think you have some experience obviously on that side of it, what are some strategies that you do to try to get these buyers to maybe go up, or that you're seeing that the brokers are trying to ask you to have them to get them to go up on their price so that you can get that top dollar?
Well, in the markets we're in, we're only buying in, top 25 MSAs. We're in the hot markets. There's people complain about how difficult it is to buy real estate because of the competition, and they don't like the competition, so they want to go find a market where there's less competition. Completely dismissing the fact that when they go to sell, there's also going to be less competition. And you don't want that, right? So you can't have it both ways. So we buy in markets where there's intense competition, which means that when we sell, there's typically intense competition. And I don't have to do any of the heavy lifting. The buyers do it by bidding each other up. And, we just sit back and watch it happen. And that's why you have the the first round, and then you have the best and final round, and then you have the best and final round, and then you have the final, and the best final. And, you keep going through this whole horse race of who's going to, go the highest. And that's really what it is. You're not negotiating with anyone. You're just trying to put one guy against the other and see when you reach all of their breaking points.
That's outrageous, Brian.
Isn't
That's
that terrible?
outrageous.
It's smart.
It's genius, but it's outrageous.
Yeah.
And just to add to this as well, I look at it from a risk management point of view, just to add to Brian, is that, look, you never know when you want to sell. Sometimes you might want to sell for various reasons. The partnership is dissolving or whatever reason, right? You don't want to be caught with your hand in the cookie jar. So what you don't want to be doing is being in Podunk, Mississippi, and please, anybody, if there's an actual town in Mississippi, don't hate me. If you don't want to be buying in Podunk, Mississippi, where presumably, like Brian said, there's no competition, because the one or two people that can presumably buy in that market from you, they all know why you're selling, because your property manager is talking. They know every single thing about your property. So you're going to have it's going to become a massive pain in the ass because there's no depth in the buyer pool. Similarly, because there's no depth in the seller pool. So you're always going to be, things are going to be on market forever, and it is going to be an atrocious process trying to sell this entire thing.
Mm.
Oh, let me tell you, you think it's hard to buy a piece of real estate that you do want? Try selling one that you don't want.
Yeah.
Good luck. It's not fun.
Well, I will say that David brought up the point that this is actually the last broker that maybe go through 5 rounds of offers right here.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on. I want you guys to share maybe a story or.
I tell you, Dan, if you were not a chiropractor, I would really be worried why you have a skull in your.
Well, that's not even why I have it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
a pirate.
I don't know. Like a guy
you a
like Omar.
pirate?
Look at Omar. If he had a skull, I'd get concerned.
Yeah, well, you'd get concerned for a lot more reasons apart from whether I was what I was doing. But I'm asking, is Dan a pirate? Is that your reason, Dan?
No. So one of my very first businesses that I still have today is a business called shopanatomical.com. We sell skeletons, skulls, brains, hearts, plastic anatomy models. And we've done 7 figures of revenue in that every year for the last 12 years. And so that was one of the returns. And instead of shipping it back, I just put it on my shelf.
Oh, God.
You should see my closet.
I don't want to see your closet.
Thank you.
All right. So next question here is, can you share a story or a scenario where you were able to negotiate a better deal or maybe better terms with a seller?
Well, I had one where the broker was walking around and just saying how great this property was, how in all the time that the owners owned it, it's never gone below 96% occupancy. And so I get back to my office and I draft an offer and I put a rent guarantee in there that says if at the closing table, the seller will put $100,000 in escrow. And if the occupancy drops below 96% for any month over the next 12 months, I get to take money out of that escrow to bring me up to the 96% rental income level. And at the end of 12 months, guys, guess how much money was left in that account?
Did the guy owe you money?
Yeah, he should have if I drafted the contract differently, but there was nothing left. It was empty. And when I wrote that contingency, I wrote that paragraph in the offer, the broker's head exploded. And I said, hey, listen, you said it, I'm just using your words against you. And the guy submitted to the seller and the seller accepted it. And sure enough, 12 months later, I had that 100,000. He never had 96% occupancy. It was all fraudulent.
Mm.
This is Dan, this is the time of my podcast. Like we play the game. Oh yeah. Well, what about this? And so this is where, somebody else has to add the next one. So top that one, boys.
I'll add on a little bit more. I typically ask I'll try and get a seller to agree to do some kind of work on a property. Like I had said before, it's simple. Just, you've got some code violations on this property. We want you to address these before closing. That is a standard ask, even in a competitive bid situation. It's not an egregious ask for somebody to do. We've done a walkthrough and noticed that you can hear a lot of what's going on in the units next door. So we asked the seller to do some blown-in installation in a couple of units and stuff like that. So I try and get some physical work with our offer if I can. even just during due diligence. And then what I'll do is if I find that they're sucking wind on doing it at the last minute, I'll say, hey, I got an idea. How about I do that for you? And you agree to do it. I'm going to take it back. I'll do it if you give me some money, you know? And so we did that with 2 sets of metal stairs on two entrances to an apartment building we just bought in Kentucky. And, you know, like the last day of due diligence, we knew that they weren't going to be able to deal with it, or that we knew they were going to do it poorly. And so last minute we said, listen, I'll take care of it. You just give me $70,000. And they agreed. We've done the sound attenuating insulation deal. He was having a problem with it. So we said, you know what, just give us a credit. And they did. And so I will, with best intentions, put some work into the work for them to do, minor stuff, major stuff, whatever it is, wherever I can. And it's stuff that's just just a few deferred maintenance items. And then we'll come back. And if they're having a problem with it, get them to give us money. So it's a backdoor way to get money here and there across the table at closing.
Hey, Brian, did any of your sellers come back, or any of your buyers on the deal you sold, did they come back with any, crazy requests?
Brian probably wouldn't do the kind of stuff I'm asking people to do. Right?
Yeah, no, yeah.
Like, no way am I replacing those.
I look at Brian, I'm like, well, I don't think that's going to fly.
As is sale, right.
As we stay up here in Boston, that'll go over like a fart in church.
Yeah, we haven't had much of that. I think on our last deal, we had the guy came back with this little small laundry list of items that he discovered, and it mostly related to some stuff that came up on the fire inspection. And, I think we just agreed to credit him a couple $1,000, which was maybe 10% of what he was looking for. And he went with it, and I tend not to ever ask for anything at the end of due diligence. I know some people like to, really try to get something at the last minute, and I usually don't. And I tell brokers, I say that, when you're going to call and tell me that you're awarding me the deal, and the next time you're going to hear from me is when I say, by the way, we're closing next week. And that's about the only thing that I really want to have you be involved in, because everything else, it's all silence from us. We're just here to close deals and make your life easy. And I think doing that gets you more. It's kind of like one of those pay it forward kind of things. That gets you better broker relationships, which gets you better deals or more deals down the line. So we're very careful about that. We did have one instance where we discovered through the third-party inspection, they said this property has aluminum wiring and it wasn't Collard, so you got to go and Collar the whole property. The quote was like $250,000 to do it. Before I went and asked the seller, we did some investigation and found, we had an old property condition report from a sale or two ago that the seller provided us that said the property was Collard. So wondering why there was a discrepancy, we did our own investigation, discovered that the maintenance staff had copper electrical outlets, and as needed, they were replacing Collard outlets with copper electrical outlets as they failed. And so there was like a spot problem. And when the second inspector came in and discovered, said that the property wasn't Collard, it was only because they looked at an outlet that had been replaced. So having discovered that, we just went back and asked the seller to do a survey of the entire property and replace the outlets as necessary. They did that. They put a whole team on it. It took them like 3 or 4 days, cost them like $5,000 or $6,000, which, to us was a huge favor to them, because we easily could ask them for a $200,000 credit and been, rightful in asking for that. So I think working with your seller and trying not to gouge them is real important.
Along those same lines, I mean, where do you guys find the balance between, making that decision, like you just mentioned, Brian, about, when do you, try to ask for those credits or retrade or whatever? And I think what the balancing act is when you have hard money, because that's hard day one, or even if you're past due diligence a little bit and you find something, you pretty much don't really have any negotiating power at that point, because you're pretty much stuck, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. If you've got hard money in the deal, they're like, hey, you want us to replace a stairwell for $20,000? No, we'll just keep your $300,000 hard money deposit. You know, so good luck with that. That's probably not going to work. You know, we had a seller on one off-market deal. He said, we want you to put up hard money. And I said, well, why would I do that? I'm not bidding against anyone. And, well, we've had to put up hard money on every deal that we've bought. Said, well, your mistake doesn't translate into anything about my business model.
Exactly.
Not going to happen.
Foiled again.
All right. So let's talk about negotiate. Well, before we move on to that, let's talk about we sometimes, or what we're talking about right now is a lot about, you know, reducing the offer price and various things like that. What are some other ways that you can negotiate better terms? I mean, obviously, you know, Charles, you mentioned, you know, getting that you know, escrow account or whatever for the 100,000 to kind of making sure that they were true on their occupancy numbers and being able to draw off of that. That's definitely a unique strategy there. Are there any other things that you guys try to do to try to get, you know, instead of just a better sales price, maybe some better terms or anything like that from these deals that you're bidding on?
One thing that we ask for is a rent-ready credit. So, you know, we'll put it in our PSA that 3 days before closing or 5 days before closing or whatever it is, we're going to do a walkthrough of all vacant units, and any unit that isn't in rent-ready condition under the seller's earlier business plan. This doesn't mean it has to be upgraded with new appliances. It just means, would you have moved a tenant in, you know, 2 weeks ago? And if the unit isn't in rent-ready condition, we get a credit at closing. You know, it could be whatever you negotiate, $1,000, $1,500, whatever the case may be. That's just a term that incentivizes the seller that when they have move-outs close to the finish line, they aren't just going like, it's the buyer's problem. You know, don't clean the carpet. Let them handle it. So that's pretty much one of the only things that we try to shoot for.
Yeah, just to follow up on that one, we do the same thing, but what's very important is that in the way that you draft the purchase and sale contract, you're allowed to go back and inspect the property and all the units right up until the closing date. Some contracts I've seen, the ability to inspect the units ends at the end of the inspection period, and then you can't look at those units ever again. But in Brian's case, when we ask for that rent-ready credit, we do go back and we look at every single unit before we buy it and make sure that if anybody is skipped, that's all accounted for on the rent roll, and we get credit for that at the closing table.
Okay. I have a couple of other questions here from the attendees here. First one is from Neil. Do you have, or can you share one or two kind of top strategies that you use during your negotiations? For example, like Matt's give and take strategy. So maybe Matt, if you could maybe start us off there and talk about that first.
Yeah, I'll just highlight it again. But we use a give and take where, like, if we're in the middle of a negotiation and the seller wants us to do something, then we may just say, okay, listen, I can do that, but you got to give me this. And just, I rarely, if we're in the middle of going back and forth on higher earnest money deposit or closing time or how much we're paying for the property, whatever it may be, we try and do a give and take. Well, okay, I can do that if you do this. And then just, I rarely just try and give. We try and give and take where we can. And whether that's physical work to the property or money or, you know, just try and make it a push-pull if I can.
You know, I always talk about the fact that you always remain in control of the deal and, you know, throughout the whole entire process. And, you know, you want to make sure that you draft your offer, your letter of intent and the offer in such a way that you're able to perform under that contract. If you put something in there, the biggest one that comes to mind is asking for seller financing in the form of a second mortgage. And then come to find out 2 weeks before you close, the bank's not going to allow a second mortgage. Well, guess what? You just lost control of that deal. You've got to go back with your hat in your hand and to the seller and say, hey, we need to renegotiate this deal. And he's going to look at you, especially, you know, that we're talking about the hard money. He's going to say like, no, I'm not renegotiating anything. You know, I'll see you at the closing table. And, you know, that's why you've got to be make sure that anything that you ask for in a contract, you're able to perform under right up until the closing.
Mine is to practice the walk away, you know, and this is, you know, we use this a lot where, you know, especially in off-market transactions when you're just negotiating directly with the seller. You know, we're buying a deal right now that we started negotiating, I think 2 months before we got a signed LOI back. And literally it was like, we'd submit a price and they would try to counter us up like $1 million. And I'd just say, nope. And, well, how about 900,000? It's like, nope. And it's like, a week goes by between every one of these exchanges. And finally, about 2 months later, we finally got our offer accepted. So I think drawing a line in the sand and being comfortable saying no is a valid negotiating tactic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to walk away. I just had one of my clients, there was 3.2 is the asking price. They offered 2.1 and they countered at 3.2. So much for the counter. And my client just drew the line in the sand. And then 6 months later, they bought the property for 2.15. And it just goes to show you the biggest lie in multifamily is the asking price. Make the offer that works for you and walk away.
Nope.
Come on, Omar. I know you have something that you're thinking of.
I mean, look, I got a few of them. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to, in my opinion, look, if the numbers work, don't cheapen out for the last, $10,000. Like Brian said, you got to make it easy for everybody. You don't literally have to get every last penny out of somebody because, you might be able to do it on this deal. You're just going to poison the well, right? That's what I think. And the way I look at it is it's a numbers game. If the numbers work, fine, good. If the numbers don't work, just move on, man. There's just a lot more fish in the sea. It's quite literally is it because at the end of the day, you're trying to do it to make money. You're not trying to do it to say you own an X number of units, right? That's the way I look at it.
That's totally solid advice right there.
Mm.
The next question here is actually directed towards Brian. As a seller, what package from one of the buyers that were submitted to you grabbed your attention and that made you want to see and work with that group?
It was their relationship with the broker. And, this broker had sold them a lot of deals before. One of the principals had worked with a management company that we had worked with before. They described where their equity was coming from, and we liked the story behind that. And it all just made a lot of sense. It had a lot less to do with price and terms to us than it did with the story behind the buyer. And that's why I say so often that whether you get a deal or don't get a deal is really, in a lot of respects, beyond your control because you don't know what criteria the seller is using to grade you. It isn't just your offer price. It isn't just the length of your escrow. There's so many pieces that go into that puzzle, and you don't know which piece is going to be the one that's important to that particular seller. So that's why this is I think Omar said it a minute ago, this is a numbers game. There's a lot of deals out there. You put in your offers and your story and your price and your terms are going to all mesh when the deal is right.
And this is, I think, something, Brian, I think I heard you say this one time, maybe a long time back in some podcast, but I did this too, but obviously you're an expert at it, is the fact that I personally try to not visit tour. I know this sounds really awful, but I personally, before we submitted the LOI, I personally try to not tour the property. I have a team, they tour it. Because all levels of research into decision-making and everything, just we as humans, every psychological research has shown that no matter how cool somebody thinks they are, no matter how experienced somebody thinks they are, our decision-making is colored by the environment we're in, how much time emotions we've invested into something. So what I try to do is just look at the numbers. Now, I have a team that I love and I rely on because they're very good at what they do, but I use them to tour the property. Now, it's not like I never tour the property, but in the first set of things, because at the end of the day, my reputation is on the line. Net, right? So I have to take a core decision based purely on numbers. That's it.
Yeah, and that was me that said that. Yeah, I did say that, Omar, and it is people find that odd, and even when I talk to my investors, they sometimes they get a chuckle out of it, but it's kind of a policy of mine. I do not go see the real estate. I've got a senior management team here at my firm that together between the four of us, we have 106,000 units of multifamily experience. When they go and tour a property and come back and give me a full report, I trust what they say about the quality of the asset. I don't need to go see it personally. The only thing I'm going to see is the numbers. I have the final veto power. And if I don't like the way the numbers shape out, I will not and cannot be influenced by my affinity for that piece of real estate, because I go, gosh, I really loved how quiet it was and the air smelled so fresh and, you know, the trees were wisping in the wind. I have none of that emotion. It's 100% numbers, and it works.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Matt.
Funny,
sounds like Omar has been hanging around with your wife.
Oh.
No.
No.
Is a short answer.
Too many psychologists around here.
We took that advice on a property. We actually lost a deal recently because I followed that advice, and I believe it. But this seller was like, an older, an older school type of person, and didn't like the fact that we didn't walk the property, and so we didn't make best and final. Because simply, the only reason our offer was competitive, but the only reason we didn't make best and final was because we didn't walk it.
Well, that's true, but we make no mistake. We walked the property, and we walked the property. Yeah. I personally have not.
Well, I said no. I'm talking the people that were on that seller, the buyer vetting call didn't walk it. I said my property manager, but to go walk.
I have. Oh, just to clarify though, like Brian said, I have a part of my team that is my team, not just my property manager. So they will walk with my property manager, and if they have to do it twice, they'll do it twice. Yeah. I am physically not going to do it.
They didn't like that I didn't do it.
Yeah, because you're the decision maker, right, Matt?
They wanted me, right.
Yeah.
And it didn't come up as much on the call, but I agree with you guys that I've got to go off the thumbs up, thumbs down, the assessment of my team. But they didn't like that the key decision maker of the company didn't walk the site.
And I get that 100%. And, my way around that, Matt, is, it's very simple. As I say, look, I have a chief investment officer. This is his role, is to go look at the real estate and provide a report back. He is a decision maker in this company. Yeah. This property has passed our decision, our decision process. This has passed our committee. This is a go. I do not and will not come see the property. And 100% of the time, that has not been an issue. But if you're like the sole decision maker, and you kind of don't have a chief investment officer that has an equity stake or something like that, I could see where that would be an issue for the seller. You definitely want your buyer to have toured the real estate, because otherwise, how do you have any confidence that they're going to close? Because they say, oh well, gee, we didn't see that it needed a new roof because we didn't go there. Yeah. That's not going to fly.
Right.
No, that's good advice.
The other thing too is that when I've seen this most often is when the property is a solid C-class property, and the seller says, "I'm not going to accept your offer until you've come out and seen this property, because I don't want you, like you said, Brian, showing up during the inspection period saying, whoa, I never knew this. You had such pretty pictures in your brochure." Like, no, you come on out of here and see what you're getting yourself into first, and that's it tends to be more for the lesser class properties.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the next question here. Well, I guess on the same lines of what we're talking about here, is the highest offer usually the offer that wins? And I think, Brian, you had mentioned a case earlier where the highest offer on one of your properties, you didn't award the deal because you didn't have that confidence of closing, right?
That's exactly right. Or I should say, more accurately, I had more confidence in the offer that was right below it. And it really does, it's funny. There's probably a lot more than two kinds of sellers, but for the purposes of this discussion, we'll say there's two kinds of sellers. There are sellers that are concerned with getting every last nickel out of their transaction. And there are sellers that want to make absolutely certain this deal closes on time per the contract. So you don't necessarily know which type of seller you're dealing with and which is most important. And if there's a loan maturity coming up, or there's like a yield maintenance period that's opening or something like that, certainty of closing, or a 1031 exchange, certainty of closing is probably the most important factor. Whereas with somebody else, it might just be price. And for us, it was a combination of the two, but certainty of closing was the most important. And we found that to be the case in almost every transaction we've been a buyer on too.
And hey, just to add to that, Dan, look, this is where a lot of these things are holistic, right? A lot of this is dependent on your relationship with the broker, right? How long you've been in the market, then what access to data do you have? So for instance, if you see somebody is liquidating a portfolio right across the thing, Now, it could be for a couple of reasons. A, they might be getting a good price, but their partnership is dissolving, and I have actually seen that situation where a partnership is dissolving. The partners hate each other so much that they're willing to take a lower price. They just don't want to see each other's face again, ever. So that's where, holistically, you got to take a step back, look at the fact that, hey, you're in the market, right? You're talking to brokers. And a lot of times what I, for instance, have done is in the 2 or 3 markets I'm in, is I'll kind of slip different things into conversations with different brokers because, look, it's any other profession. All brokers talk to each other. They all know each other. Like, there's only 3, 4, 5 brokers that control every big market. Or by control, I mean 60, 70, 80% of the deals. They all know the same set of buyers, right? They all know what's going on. And this is where, just being on good terms, being somebody who's closing deals, being easy to deal with, saying what you do and do what you say, and not trying to literally make the broker's life a living hell, right? This is where all the small little things come into play. And to give you an idea, we're on a deal in Atlanta right now where the list price was at least $4,000 per unit. This is about a 200 unit deal, higher than what our best and final, best offer is going to be. Because throughout the whole process with this broker, I mean, we invested a considerable amount of money, developing our relationship. Then a bunch of guys we knew put in the good word for us because they've done deals with this broker before. But the bigger deal there was, my simple question was, look, man, once you've had the conversation, what is it going to do to help you, give you the most comfort that we're going to close this deal, but also when you now go to the buyer, when you go to basically the seller, you can put your best foot forward. What can I do to give you that surety and comfort? So you tell me. And then he gave me 3 more things. He's like, look, man, you can go down on the hard money. We can cut you a deal on the price, but here's kind of what they're looking for: a beefy resume, as an example, because that's just what the owner wants. I mean, this is the way it is. So I could present all of those things, right? So this is where developing those relationships also a lot of times will bail you out.
All right. So the next question here is coming from Alex. He's asking, after you guys add value and stabilize an asset, who are the people that are buying these stabilized properties with all the equity that's already been captured?
Good question, right?
Not us.
Yeah, right. Somebody, I've heard a lot of bigger, like what? I'll leave his name out of it. But there's a large figurehead out there talking about assembling a lot of multifamily, doing all the value add, and then selling the whole thing up to a REIT, because a REIT's not as, they're less smart than he is, and they're going to go and buy all 10,000 units that he's assembled and stuff like that into a REIT.
Matt, is that the same guy that says you can buy multifamily at any price because the prices just keep going up?
Get into the game. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I think I do. Yeah.
Don't own your house. Buy 100 units or up, right? So
I love how people start putting names in the text box.
And he enters the stage on a parachute, right? So anyway, I think that it's a pipe dream to say that's how we're all going to exit from our properties.
Yeah.
What we do is we leave meat on the bone, right? So we're turning a complex in North Carolina right now. I'm only turning like 50 to 60 of the units. And partly because the tenant base there wants 2 options. So I can do a unturned classic reno that's just got some, fresh coat of paint. It's been cleaned up, but it doesn't have the, new cabinets and LVP flooring and super spicy everything in the unit and everything like that. And I can give tenants 2 price options, but also to folks looking to buy, I can say, listen, I've proven the market that I can do these first 60% of the complex, and look at my rent bumps. So we tend to leave meat on the bone so that we can sell. We don't leave every stone unturned to absolutely jack up NOI as high as I can get it. In that, because I think that the question asker is correct, or what they're insinuating is correct, is that if I go and strip all the value add that I can do out of the complex, somebody who's just going to look to get behind the wheel and drive and make it buy it a 6 cap or 6.5 cap from me is the only buyer I'm going to get. I tend to structure it if somebody can take it from me and buy and take it to the next level. So I think it's a different look. We don't do all the work there is to do.
Well, I can tell you in the deals that we've sold, and we've sold some where we've actually gone and upgraded every unit, save for a small handful. you always have a few tenants that will never move. We've sold to groups that have an avatar very similar to our own, where they're value add real estate operators, and they're just looking to put money in the deal and boost rents. And you would think, gosh, we just got done renovating this whole property. What's left? And, so what they wanted to do in their business model, and in two cases that I can think of that we've sold, they were going to go and put in crown molding and glass mosaic backsplashes and just kind of take our renovations up a couple notches and try to get $75 to $100 rent bump out of doing that. So there's that seller or that buyer. That's one. Another is your 1031 buyer who's just looking for an easy, speedy cash flow play. Another is your family office who just doesn't really have the infrastructure to go out and want to do value add deals. Another is a group that we're talking to. They had raised, or were in the process of raising $1 billion with a B dollars for a workforce housing fund, and what they wanted to do was acquire.
Oh, did he just freeze?
Oh, right at the climax.
I know. I'm hanging on the edge.
Let me just say, I was gonna piggyback on everything. That was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Yes, Brian, thank you.
We didn't hear. So you got to say it again, Brian. You know you froze.
No, I didn't know that. No.
Say that last part again.
That was the bet. You froze at the perfect. Like they were going to acquire.
Which buyer did you hear?
What are they going to buy?
Billion.
The billion with a B.
The billion with a B. They raised yes, of course. They raised $1 billion, and what they were going to buy was workforce housing, which they were
pension funds with the local Atlanta
guy. It wasn't, but it's that kind of a thing. Okay. So what they're looking for is 70s and 80s deals, and they're going to use 30% leverage, and they're shooting for like a 9 IRR. That's really all they needed for their cost of capital. That's another buyer. And then you also got to think about, let's say you go and you do a value add and you intend to hold for 7 to 10 years. What is the shelf life of an interior renovation? And, it's probably about 7 to 10 years. So you could renovate a property, hold it for 10 years. And even though it was fully renovated by you, in 10 years, it's a value add deal again, because tastes have changed. No longer are your black appliances in vogue. Now it's something else. And the next buyer can come and do value adds. So there's a lot of different scenarios in addition to exactly, Matt hit the nail on the head. Leave some meat on the bone for the next guy. Don't renovate every unit, or don't take them all the way to the highest level. But there's a number of people out there, and it's almost the famous question of, how many, can you find a lender for this deal? It's like, well, how many lenders are there? They're all going to give you a different answer, right? It's the same thing with buyers. They all have a different motivation.
Good point.
So we have about 8 minutes left. And so what I'm going to do over these last few questions that have come in is I'm going to just pick on somebody and have you answer that particular question. So,
hey, Dan, do we have the option to pass on the question? Can we pass it to someone else if we don't like it?
Yes, but I have a feeling you probably won't do that.
Yeah. Or if you don't like the other panelist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice
well,
one,
I can also kick off people's video too. No. All right. So Mariana is asking here, would love advice on how to best work with / negotiate with a broker whose answers to questions are quite elusive and often contradict information in the OM / my market analysis while trying to preserve the relationship. So I'm going to randomly pick Matt to go ahead and answer that question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I would send the broker your underwriting. I would underwrite the deal and send the broker your analysis saying, hey, Mr. Broker, maybe you can help me understand, because this is how I analyze the deal. I'm looking for it at this cap rate. I'm looking to produce this rate of return. I'm looking to, here are my statistics that are going to govern what my price is going to be. Here's how I'm underwriting it. It seems like I'm different from what's your offering package is and what you're telling me. Let me know what I missed. And then I'd show them your books. I've shown a lot of brokers our underwriting on deals, and they've either challenged it or shrugged and said, well, yeah, maybe you might have something there. So, that's what I would do.
And Omar, I'm going to ask you this next question, this last question here. And then after this, I'm going to have you guys share a little bit how people can reach you and contact you if they want to further the conversation with you as well. So David's asking, what do you do when you encounter a deal where your bid is X and the broker says, I have X plus 30% offer? Do you ever re-underwrite to see if it's possible, or do you just laugh and walk away?
Well, I can do both, number one. But I choose to basically, like I said earlier, look, if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, I really don't know why this is such a controversial thing. Look, if the number works and you're not going to kill yourself in the process and you are not literally trying to get every last dollar out of somebody because you're being a reasonable person and assuming the other party is being reasonable, dude, if the number works for you, do the deal. If it doesn't, why are you losing sleep? I mean, the last time I checked, literally this country is not running out of apartment buildings. In fact, we have the opposite problem. We have too many of these. Finding the right one in the right market is a problem. So yes, if the numbers work, they work. If they don't, move on. You know, I don't know, go talk to your wife, go talk to your girlfriend, go get a beer. I don't know. There's lots of things in the world you could be doing with your time is what I'm trying to say. Go watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians. How about that?
But don't let your wife talk to your girlfriend, whatever you do.
Especially Charles. I think we should let Charles answer these questions. You should.
Okay, last question is with Charles from Aquila.
There you go. Make it a good one.
This would be a good one for him.
Okay. You guys know this woman? Okay.
Why do you guys think it is necessary to take 100% of the emotions out of buying a property?
And this is my question. This is such an easy question. I'm actually going to have Omar answer it for me. No, listen, this is strictly the beautiful thing. The reason why I love multifamily, the beautiful thing about it, it is strictly a numbers game. There's no emotion involved. As Omar was saying, if the numbers work, you buy it. If the numbers don't work, you fix it. Like if the guy's got an offer that's 30% higher than what you came at, well, let's go back and revisit the numbers. Maybe I did something wrong in my analysis. If you can't fix the numbers, move on to the next one. There's plenty out there, and it's just it's a formula. That's all you've got to look at.
And look, just to add, because Charles teed me up for this, at the end of the day, it's a free country. You know, if somebody else wants to come and pay 30% more, I mean, look, last time I checked, we don't live in North Korea. So if somebody wants to come and pay 30% more, well, that's their problem. How is it your problem?
Yeah,
I would give one additional advice is I would actually put your offer in writing. If you want to get serious about it, you can template off an offer pretty quick. You know, crank out an LOI, fire it off, and then go visit Charles's girlfriend.
Yeah.
Right.
Which one?
Wow. Oh. Hey Dan, that's gotta hit the editing floor, okay, please.
Charles, you know all the social media is going to only be talking about Charles's girlfriend and not.
Well, I like what Aquila just said. He said this was the most fun panel he's ever been watching. So that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, guys, why don't you start with Brian, go with Matt, and then Omar, and then Charles. Charles, you can close it out there and share everybody a little bit about how they can find out more information about you, and if they are interested in possibly jumping on your investor list or something like that to see your deal flow, see if they could do that as well.
Well, the best way to find us is on our website, praxcap.com. It's praxcap.com. It's kind of a somewhat abbreviating Praxis Capital. Of course, you can also find me on the Bigger Pockets forums, and I'm there a lot. So feel free to reach out to me either of those two ways.
Matt?
Me?
Yes.
All right, why not? Okay, they can get a hold of me at derosagroup.com. There it is, derosagroup.com. They can join our investor list, join our newsletter, and check out more about us on our YouTube channel at YouTube/DeRosa Group.
And I'll just add that I've checked out his DeRosa Group YouTube channel. It's very good stuff. Very good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll return the favor and listen to your podcast.
Oh, you're going to love it. You're going to be on it next, by the way. You didn't even know that.
I'm in. I love you, man. I'll come up and see you in Boston. I'm not too far away.
Come on, baby.
Why not?
Think about my plane.
So you guys, you can go to our website, boardwalkwealth.com. We've tried to keep it really simple. You enter your name. Hopefully you know that. You enter your email. Hopefully you know that too. And then you write where you found out about us, and you write MFin Summit. So we know Dan referred you. You can also email me directly. And also, by the way, once you do that, click on the button below it. So then you get added. And you can email me at Omar, OMAR, at boardwalkwealth, one word.com. We also have a YouTube channel. It is not as nice as the DeRosa Group's YouTube
Oh.
channel, but we're working on it.
All right, you can reach me at themultifamilyattorney.com or multifamilyinvestingacademy.com. And I came late to this this podcast world. I didn't think the internet was going to catch on, but I started a podcast recently. It has been an absolute blast. I love it. I had Dan Hanford on there. I actually made the guy blush. Okay, so if you guys want to, if you think this
podcast,
come to my podcast, this is what it's like. So.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you guys so much for being here and participating. This has been a fun panel. And so thank you guys so much. And I really do appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. It was good. It was good.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, I'll have you guys go ahead and just hit your camera off and your microphone there too. And we'll go ahead and close everything out here. All right. Let's see.